So I'd like to welcome all of you to this online streaming from Against the Stream. And some of the story around it, for me at least, is Noah had invited me to teach regularly at the center in March. And so much has happened, as you all know, and decided to go online, and that I'll be able to do this regularly on Saturday nights. Whereas if I had to attend, it'd probably be only once a month. So I want to thank Against the Stream for putting this all together and making this possible. And I'd also like for you to consider, after the webinar, if you're able to make a donation to Against the Stream. I'm doing this as well to help support them, and as well as, my real intent in all of this is to be of service to people in their meditation practice, and that's mostly what I do. So those of you who don't know me, my name's Jason Siff, and I've been teaching meditation for over 30 years. I started as a Buddhist monk in Sri Lanka in the 1980s and left the order in around 1990 and returned to the States, to Los Angeles. And actually I started teaching in Los Angeles at the Community Meditation Center. That's before Noah and other teachers arrived in LA. And I do teach a form of Vipassana. You'll hear more about it tonight. But the main difference in what I teach has to do with part of my own history of meditation, and was the basis of my book, Unlearning Meditation, which is that any practice that we start with, we might find we need to be able to look at the instructions and how we've been doing it, that we may shift to other forms of meditation, that meditation, when it's done through a lifetime, may involve, choosing different practices to take up at different times, and to meditate in ways that really meet you in the present, rather than feeling like you have to stick with the same practice for years and years. So even what I teach, I really do teach it in a way where I consider people will, probably move on, or come back at a later date, or, find some things of use, and maybe, that their meditation practice, I believe, really has to become their own. That this is something that we're doing for the most part individually. It's about connecting with our own inner experience. And I don't believe that somebody outside of us can, dictate what we should be doing at any given time. My belief is that we often can find more skillful ways of meditating on our own. But it's not like it just, they say, suddenly you realize, well, I should be meditating in this way or that way. It's more that meditation is something which you can explore, which you can reflect back on, where you can learn more about your experience. So in this approach to meditation, I call it recollective awareness, and recollection is a key element. So the basic idea is that while you meditate, you are more open to whatever it is you experience in meditation. You may have, and I will give some instruction, but they're very minimal instructions. And the thing is that you would recollect your experience afterward. So tonight, after meditation sitting, we will have a period of about 10 minutes where you can write down your experiences. And what I suggest when you write down your meditation experiences is to start with what it is you remember most easily. So instead of trying to strain your memory, to let things filter up, that there are certain things that have occurred in the meditation sitting that you start to recall afterwards. You might recall, something simple like sounds in the room, or certain aches and pains, or feeling drowsy. Uh, but you may also, remember things like images you saw, or um, unusual ideas or insights, or something that you became aware of around yourself that you hadn't been, they hadn't noticed before. So, what I'm suggesting here is that when you do write down your sitting, just write down what it is you remember. And during the sitting, don't worry about it. Just let your experience more or less be as it is. You don't need to manage it, or have certain things happen, or really do much of anything, except adopt a meditation posture and um, be more, be kinder to yourself while you're sitting. To me, that's the essential attitude around meditation practice. Is a way in which we can be kind to ourselves and gentle with ourselves while we're meditating. My belief is that our minds are rather delicate, and that we're not, how do you say, if we approach our inner world with certain harshness or aggression, we're just going to force things. We're just going to create more tension and frustration often. Whereas if we approach it with a kind of kindness and just a willingness to listen, a willingness to be with whatever is coming up, then you start to find that acceptance starts to build naturally. And I prefer, to, instead of calling it acceptance, to call it, something realistic. We're learning to tolerate certain things about ourselves. If we're honest with some of what we might experience in meditation, is that we don't like some of it. And the idea is not just to say, well, I'm going to accept it. The idea is, it's basically, I'm going to start to be kind to my dislike of what it is I'm experiencing. I'm going to allow myself not to, not to try to change my irritation or try to be friendly with it. I'm actually going to be a bit kinder and friendlier to the fact that I'm feeling irritated. And I think in this particular time period, with what many of us are going through, that might be kind of a helpful thing to think about. Like, how are we with, the anxiety that's coming up, at different times during the day, with the fears, the worries, the sadness, the hopelessness, instead of saying, well, I'm not going to feel afraid, or I'm not going to worry. What I would say, especially in the sitting, let yourself have that fear. It belongs in your sitting. Meditation is a perfect place to sit with whatever is troubling you, whatever turmoil that you're in. And as you're sitting with it, you may start to notice that sometimes you want to get rid of it, and just be kinder to that part of you that wants to get rid of it. And things do start to change. And that's an important feature of this kind of practice. And I was thinking about it today before giving this talk, is that one of the earlier things I had a difficulty with meditation teachings is that many of them felt to me like I didn't belong in the meditation sitting. I was supposed to somehow separate and exile, certain parts of myself from the meditation practice. And it didn't work. As much as I would sit and meditate and watch my breath, or note the sounds and body sensations, I kept finding that there was a part of me that wanted to talk, that wanted, in a sense, to fantasize and to carry on with some kind of planning, or to reminisce about some events. And I kept seeing that, well, that's a part of me that I need to let in, instead of a part that should go away. And this really I found to be very helpful, because the end result is, once I really allowed certain parts of myself into my meditation sitting, they didn't last as long. They didn't get me as wound up. They weren't as dominant. They would go away on their own. And that's a much kinder approach to yourself, to let your anger, in a sense, walk out of the room, instead of you pushing it out of the room, to see if you can find, something in your meditation practice, which is that you are in it. And that's one way in which meditation is also probably not so much different than psychotherapy. Uh, when you go to a therapist and you talk about your experiences, um, and when you're in meditation and you're telling yourself about what you're experiencing, or you're talking to somebody about a plan you have or something you want to do, um, it's the same kind of mind most of the time. And to kind of just let that in, to kind of say, well, it's all right to have these dialogues. In fact, you might be curious at times in your meditation sitting is, who am I talking to? Um, you know, that is often, something that will reveal something about it. Or another side with your dialogues is, or monologues, is that you might be curious about, well, what is this voice that's speaking? What kind of tone of voice is this? Does this seem to be like, a commentator, a storyteller? Is this tone kind of angry and bitter? Is it a sad, forlorn tone? Um, and this is something you can also notice while, your thinking is going on. So instead of trying to stop your thoughts and stop these internal conversations, let them go on and listen in. Get a sense of, really how are you talking in your meditation sittings? Because that kind of talking is just never going to go away. No matter how many years you've been practicing meditation, you're still going to find yourself sitting down and closing your eyes, and there it is, that voice again, another conversation, another thing you're getting involved in. Uh, and I really recommend that you allow that in, that instead of trying to manage it, you in a sense just accept it, and it's fine. Um, Now another side of meditation practice of allowing thinking is that um, it doesn't quite work if you don't also allow drifting off. That basically the two go together. And this may sound kind of strange to some of you. Like, why would allowing thinking and allowing going towards sleep, somehow be related? But when you sit in an open meditation practice where you're not trying to direct anything, you start to find that your thinking is at times a kind of drifting. And that some of your thoughts may get a bit nonsensical, fuzzy, like they sort of lose a certain substance to them, or they may trail off into some unusual scenes or fantasies. And just let that happen. Let the sitting be one where you can fall asleep if you tend to go to sleep. It's not a problem. Because if we make these things problems, what we're going to do is we're going to, first of all, exclude them from our experience, and then we can't really learn from them. And generally, we're going to create much more tension in ourselves to try to stay awake or try to stay out of the thinking, instead of just letting it be. Just kind of let your mind go on. And then, what I've heard for the last 30 years is, how is this meditation? How is this actually going to work? And the simple thing is, what I had to come up with as a definition for meditation is that it's the intention to meditate and what happens afterwards. So when you go into your meditation posture, you sit down, you close your eyes, you're ready to meditate. Anything that happens is meditation. And you might not trust me on that, but you might find that over time, just that in itself is changing your orientation to your inner experience. It's doing something to you. We don't usually sit perfectly still with our eyes closed and are wakeful. That's just not a common human activity. And that may be enough. So when I said, that the instructions here are minimal, I really did mean it. That's quite minimal. And if you want to bring your attention back to something, I suggest instead of bringing it back to your breath, bring it back to your hands touching each other on your lap, or your feet touching the ground, or your rear against a cushion. Just some external contact of your body. But I would say, don't hold it there. Don't use that as an instruction, of now this is just where I'm going to be. Use it just as a place to come to for a little while, and then let your mind go where it will go. And it doesn't matter where it goes. You know, I really encourage you to just be much more open and allowing to let this be an experiment. You know, you don't know the outcome, uh, and then we'll come back together. Um, so what I would suggest is you get in meditation posture, whatever it is. I won't be giving you any guided meditation. The instructions I gave you will be sufficient, and I'll just go over them really briefly. Is just adopt a comfortable posture, one that you probably won't need to move, but if you do, you can. You can sit or you can lie down, um, and just allow your thoughts and feelings into your sitting. Bring your attention to the touch of your hands or touch of your feet if you want, or maybe for you it's easier to bring your attention to sounds or to something else, um, and let things kind of develop. Let yourself drift off. Let the thoughts go on longer. Um, Notice some of the things around the voices and just be very kind to those tense, harsh or strict critical voices you might have.